Hello, everyone, and welcome to Money Matters with Doug Jones, the personal finance show designed to help you move forward financially. I'm Doug Jones. Welcome to the new year, and it's a time of year when everyone starts thinking about moving forward financially and personally, and their well-being. I'm sure, like most of you, we're all happy to see 2020 behind us and looking for a successful 2021. And it's also the time of year when we'll start to make many resolutions trying to plan for our financial future. And to help us with that, I've got a guest today. Her name is Rebecca Sudano. Rebecca Sudano is a Senior Vice President at BDO Canada Limited. Welcome to the show, Rebecca.
Thank you for having me.
Well, as we plan to go forward, it's the time of year, as I noted, that many people make resolutions. And then we also know that most resolutions actually don't succeed. In fact, there's statistics that show that 80% of them fail by February. So in actually moving forward financially, a lot of people talk about not making a resolution, but making a financial plan for the coming year. And I'm wondering if you could talk to us about the benefit of a financial plan.
Thanks, Doug. A financial plan is an opportunity to write down, chart, some of the things that you feel are really important to you. A plan is something that we do in many aspects of our life. As you mentioned, the resolutions tend to sometimes drop off. So I wonder why that is. And so on a financial plan, the benefit is all good because it's all about you and it's your finances and what is the best use of the money that you're earning. And as you mentioned, 2020 has been very odd. And for many, the plan they maybe had in place had to be adjusted. So this is a really good opportunity to sit at 2021 and say, what do I feel like 2021 could look like as a financial plan?
So can you go over things to include in that financial plan and questions to ask yourself as you're creating your own financial plan?
Yeah, and that is so individual. One of the things I've learned, and even in my own personal life, is that I am actually not like anyone else. And so your plan has to only be about you. If we go back to how do we set plans, it's similar to how we set goals, and we call those SMART goals: specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time. So if we take that and we put that into our financial plan, it's an opportunity for us to sit and say, where do I want to be in a month, in 3 months, in 6 months, and in a year?
Okay, so I meet with people all the time in my daily job, and I find a lot of people don't have plans, and people who do have plans get confused with their plan because life changes as we move forward. Things happen. And so as we start creating our plan, and you're right, it's an individual plan for everyone, what are the things we should think about? How often should we be looking at it to change it as life changes for us all?
Yeah, and we know change is going to happen. So when I look at an individual situation, oftentimes I'm working with an individual who has incurred debt. And so it's a really good opportunity to actually look back and say, what is it on a monthly basis that's happening? So sometimes setting it down to be a monthly plan is actually easier than trying to set it up to be a 3 or 6 month plan. So maybe start with the first step, which is, let's just look at a general month. What does a normal, whatever normal is, what is a normal spending month look like? Fortunately, for our financial technology today, we have the opportunity of using a debit card. And if you use a debit card for your spending, you can actually look at your bank statement rather than guessing. So perhaps we think we're spending $400 on groceries, but actually when we go to our bank statement and we assess that, we realize, yikes, it's actually $600. But that's a good thing because we're recognizing where the money's going. Doug, as I speak to individuals who have financial difficulties, the best budgeters are the people who are on a fixed income because they don't have a choice. So they have that income comes in every month. They don't have the opportunity to spend a little bit extra here and spend a little bit extra here. So we can learn a lot from looking at our bank statement and recognizing and categorizing all the things that we spend money on. But at the same time, because it's that individual plan, we need to look at why should I not spend money at the LCBO? Why should I not spend money on smoking or a gym membership? Because this plan has to be individualized. So it has to be about you. And if that's important to you, then we need to be honest with ourselves and put that on our spending plan. So 2 tips. 1, look at where you are today. 2, be totally honest with yourself, because at the end of the day, it's your money that you're going out working really hard for. What is your plan for your money?
Okay, I think that's great advice. And like you, I see people who have trouble. First of all, they either don't have a budget or a plan. And when I do ask them if those who do have a plan, they're kind of wishy-washy on the details, sort of your example of the grocery spend. But then the other thing I notice is you will get people who at the start of the year are very committed to this. You know, at the start of the year, I want to make things better. You know, 2020 has been a real tough year. I'm going to make 2021 a better opportunity. And so they go in with great gusto, kind of like, I'm going to exercise. And we all know that's not going to happen. So, you know, your energy level wanes over time. So the question is, what are some tips you can give people to sort of reinvigorize themselves, stay on that plan and see it through the end of the year?
Yeah. And I personally, Doug, I'm a goal-driven individual in every aspect of my life. And so for me, what I try to do is give myself rewards. It might be the pat on the back, but for others, it may be monetary. So if we're talking about a spending plan and we're looking at, you know, what do I want to use my money for? It's my money. I earned it. So what is my plan for that money? So perhaps at the beginning, it's setting it up to be, this is what it looks like right now. This is what I would like it to look like, and how am I going to get there? So it may not be like a diet where we say all of a sudden, I am not going to spend money on this. It might be perhaps we limit that amount or we decrease that amount, rather than just taking it out altogether. Again, about the occasional times to look at it is going to be very individual. What I tend to suggest is that base it on the reward system. So if you are planning to reward yourself at the end of every month because you met your spending plan, you only spent what was allowed for, you allowed yourself for groceries, you only spent what you allowed yourself for entertainment, and you met that and you reached that goal, what's the reward? If the reward is, I get to get takeout, then make sure that you do that and you reward yourself. And if that reward is monthly, then you want to review your plan monthly. If your plan is, I am going to do this for 3 months and I'm going to see where I'm at, then at the end of 3 months, you sit and you review it. And you look at all the successes that you've done, because the chances are we are going to have a little hiccup. There might be a car repair we weren't expecting. But this is an opportunity to say, oh, right, my next plan, I got to remember to incorporate that so that that doesn't happen to me again.
Right. So the reward program, I agree with that. I think that's a great way of looking at it. I also think that I try to tell people, look at it every month, but because it's just sort of your overall plan, let's do a plan for a longer period of time and then sort of every month reassess where you're at with it and your achievement of it. And I think that if you're able to hit those milestones and achieve some of the goals you've set for yourself, that is the reward or the pat in the back, as you noted. And that should be what the encouragement is. If you sort of set it, I think, as sort of over the course of a year, this is what I'm going to achieve, and you don't go back and look at it on a monthly basis, then you don't see the milestones and the achievements you achieved. And so you don't recognize the success. And that's when I think you sort of become fatigued and you kind of go, oh, what's the point of this? So I like your approach of let's look at it every month. But I do think having those longer term goals, particularly when they come into emergency funds and savings plans and retirement for the golden years, those things kind of need to be worked into it. Okay, so what I think we should start talking about is we have the financial plan, but the financial plan really ultimately needs to move into a budget. And so I know that I think that that's something we need to get people to start thinking about is how to create their budget and goals to look at as we move forward with the budget. Do you want to, before we go to break, do you want to start introducing some of the concepts of the budget?
Yeah. So I love the word spending plan instead of budget. I feel like I'm not on a diet. And a spending plan allows me the opportunity to say, I've earned the money, where do I want to spend it? And this is where you mentioned already, like having goals. And one of those goals is, where do I want to be in a year financially? Where do I want to be in 5 years, 10 years? And then we talk about the retirement. And then we work those amounts into our budget. And they don't have to be big, as long as we're identifying them and saying, for right now, I can afford this, do that, celebrate the success. And then as you adjust that budget on a monthly basis, when you're beginning to look at it, you have the opportunity to say, I really want to not spend that money on this category because I want to move that into this category instead because I'm really seeing the benefit of that. So that spending plan can have in it the monthly spend, the short-term goal, the intermittent goal, and then those long-term goals. But all the way along, we have the opportunity to celebrate the success of I achieved that goal. And we get to benefit of reward by looking at the increase of our retirement fund, the increase of our education fund for our children, perhaps.
Well, I think that's great advice. And I think that the opportunity to sit down as you create your plan, your sort of overall structural plan of what you want to achieve. And then the budget, as you noted, has the short and midterm and long-term goals. And then starting to work that into our budgets so that we have a plan that we can reference back to each month, I think is really, really important. So what I think we should do now is we're going to be leading into a break. So what we'll do is when we come back from the break, I think we should focus in on some of those key areas to focus on in our financial plan in order to have a successful 2021.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Join me on the next episode of Money Matters when I'll be speaking with Rebecca Sudano of BDO Canada Limited about budgeting or having a financial plan for the coming year. Welcome back to Money Matters with Doug Jones, and I'm Doug Jones. Joining me today is Rebecca Sudano, Senior Vice President at BDO Canada Limited. Well, Rebecca, in the first segment, we talked about a financial plan for the year. And we also talked about that it was a new year and people making resolutions and how a lot of the resolutions don't prove to be successful. So we talked about the importance of creating a financial plan. And in creating the financial plan, there are certain key functions that are extremely important for us. And I think one of the starting points, like we talked previously about starting to focus on the budget, but I think one of the important things to do, even before we delve into our budget, is an assessment of our overall financial situation, our net worth. What do we own? What do we owe? And why is it important to have a starting point as what our financial situation is before we actually delve into the budget.
I absolutely agree with you, Doug. And when we spoke earlier about the monthly budget, have you experienced the same thing where it's very upsetting and sad to look at an individual's budget and see that the first thing they're listing on the budget is debt repayment? It comes before groceries. It comes before rent. Like, it's like the debt repayment is the first thing to go on the budget and then everything else. So I absolutely agree with you on the assessing this net value is to look at what debt am I carrying and how does that impact my spending plan, instead of looking at it and saying my spending plan is based around the debt that I'm carrying.
Yeah, and I'd add to that I see it both ways, Rebecca, the people that it's the number one priority. And then I also see the people who recognize that, well, I need food and shelter and I have to take care of my family first, so that the debt repayment portion falls to the bottom. But then they're coming to contact me because they're being contacted by creditors who are looking to garnish their wages. So I think that the overall assessment of knowing where you're at and what do you have going out on a monthly basis is extremely important, because if you are carrying a fair amount of debt, for instance, as when you calculate your net worth, you got to figure out how you're going to handle that in your budget. So I'm in the same page as you that I think that this is a key component in figuring out how you move forward.
Absolutely.
So how do you, what do you suggest, like in making that assessment, what do you suggest people do?
So one option right at the beginning, and it is a choice because we have to make choices for ourselves, but a choice is to own the debt, to acknowledge that this is what I owe. And in doing that, it isn't about looking at what do I owe on the minimum payment. It's what do I owe on the amount of the debt. Oftentimes, we can have a conversation with an individual about, well, how much do you owe on the credit card? Well, I owe $125 a month. We have to own the fact that what we owe on the credit card is actually $15,000.
Mm-hmm.
The second would then be to say, okay, and what is it costing me to own that debt? And look at the interest rates that are being charged on the debt that we're carrying. If we take a look at the net of what I own versus what I owe, and we establish the fact that if I sold everything that I had, would I be able to pay back the debt that I have? The answer could be yes, but in order to do that, I have to sell my home, liquidate my assets. Or we can look at it and say, in order for me to hold on to my investments in my home, how can I then look at this debt? And so when we bring it back into the spending plan, we have the opportunity to say, I own this debt. This is the spending plan that I've established as a workable spending plan for my household on a monthly basis. Now we have to look at how we can get the two to speak to each other to accomplish that financial plan and that financial goal that we've chosen to set for ourselves. And what timeline is it that we set that goal for? So is it, I want to be debt free in 3 years? Then it's then establishing, this is the debt I own. How am I going to pay that within that 3 years? And the cost of that is then to go back to the financial budget on a monthly basis and say, so what am I prepared to do to make that happen?
Exactly. I actually reference people who come in with those minimum plans, as you noted, on the credit card. And I ask them if they have a paper copy of one of their credit card bills, because on there it will say that if you continue to make the minimum payments, how long it's going to take you to pay it off. And I recently saw a person who would be mid-50s, and it said 128 years and 7 months.
Yeah.
I had to sort of say, probably not going to make it. So that's why I always think that the starting point is the assessment of where you're at.
Yeah.
Again, what do you have for assets? Because we could be able to look at refinancing one of those assets as part of the budgetary financial plan.
Yep.
And then also, what are the minimum payments? What's more than a minimum payment you're going to be able to work into your, as you call it, spending plan in order to get out of this in the future. So let's I'm going to get you to walk us now from sort of, we've written it all down. I also tell people to write down all the interest rates on everything they owe, because I think that's kind of an important component, which I know you're going to get to.
Yeah.
So now take us from there into the spending plan or budget, where you've already talked about sort of like, I'm going to set a goal. I want to be out in 3 years, and then we can work backwards as to how much per month. But work us through that so people have a little bit better understanding as to how to go through that process to create the plan for themselves.
Yeah. So again, it's very individualized. And so the very first thing that I believe you need to do is you need to decide what you're prepared to do. What investment are you prepared to make into becoming debt-free? So for example, let's assume that you've listed your debt, you've listed your interest rate. And if you look at your net worth, if you were to sell your house and pay off the debt, is that something that would be agreeable to you? If the answer is yes, you have your solution. If the answer is no, because my parents live with me, my children go to school there, we've lived there for a long time, that's our home, then the opportunity to look at that and say, okay, so then what are you prepared to do in order to be able to stay at home? Well, there's lots of options. So the first is going back to that spending plan and seeing if there's anything in the spending plan that there's an opportunity to either cut or reduce to allow you to pay more than the minimum payment on the debt. If that doesn't work because the numbers and the math don't work, then the next step is to look at what are the interest rates being charged, and would I actually benefit from not having interest continuing to accumulate on the debt? Because if that would help you to become debt-free in the period of time that you've chosen, then there are other options that are available to you. Those are like debt solutions. So here at BDO, we offer debt solutions. Those debt solutions include a process called a consumer proposal. Because a consumer proposal is federally legislated, it allows for the interest to be completely frozen, and it allows for the repayment of debt over a period of 5 years. Sometimes, because of the size of the debt has to be compromised. So when you're looking at your individual debt situation and looking at the options, by looking at the household spending plan and assessing how much you feel you have available to service debt, if you begin with servicing the debt the way it is today with the interest, look at how long it's going to take you, like you mentioned, 115 years sometimes, to be out of debt. If your plan, your goal, is to actually be out of debt in 3 to 5 years, a consumer proposal is an alternative to that, and it gives you the opportunity to actually be debt-free. So the way I put it into visual, because I'm a very visual learner, is to say, do I want to walk on the treadmill for the next 5 years, and at the end of that 5 years still be walking on the same treadmill going nowhere? Or do I actually want to make the change to my financial situation on a monthly basis to give myself the opportunity to actually be walking on a different space treadmill in 5 years? There won't be a treadmill because the debt will be gone.
Right. So let's assume we've come up with a plan to deal with our financial situation. So we've got our goals, we've calculated our plan. We've come up with a solution if we're carrying debt, how to handle the debt. So once we don't have those debt worries, then in theory, we're going to have extra money in our budget.
Yeah.
Now, I think one thing that should be very, very clear to most viewers is that the COVID pandemic created some financial difficulty for people. And if you had had an emergency fund or some money put aside for a crisis, it would have been very beneficial in 2020.
Yeah.
So if you're creating your budget and you've got some extra money, does it allow us the opportunity to set up the emergency fund, and what's the importance of it? And second of all, there's a lot of statistics out there that show us that we don't have company pension plans generally anymore. And so we need to start saving for our own retirement or golden years. And what we're discovering is, because of the cost of living, a lot of people don't have any money in the retirement plan. So how do we incorporate that into our budget?
Yeah, and the benefit of the retirement plan, Doug, is of course the tax benefit. So if we're a salaried employee, we are having income tax deducted from our pay. One way of being able to obtain back a tax refund is actually to make an investment into an RRSP. The difficulty is that sometimes we are so focused on putting money into an RRSP, but we're carrying the debt.
Right.
So if you can use the opportunity to contribute to the RRSP, obtain a tax refund, and actually use the tax refund to pay down the debt, you've actually benefited at both sides of the coin.
Right.
So the retirement fund gives you the opportunity to say, I am saving for the future. The tax benefit gives you the opportunity to pay down the debt, which is still working towards your financial plan of potentially being debt-free.
Yes. What I've seen too is I think you got to be very careful in that, as you noted. If you get the tax refund, it's going to be able to help you retire the debt. That's fantastic. I do see people trying to put money into, say, an RSP, but they're carrying significant amounts of debt, and they've had some credit problems, so the interest rate of their debt is extremely high.
Yes.
So one of the things I don't recommend people do is taking money and putting it into an RSP, but it's actually small dollars. Meanwhile, they're making the minimum payments on a 24% interest rate credit card.
Agreed.
Because the rate of return on their RSP isn't going to equate to the debt that they're continuing to pay. So I think, again, that's all part of our discussion on the how to build that financial plan. What are the interest rates and what's best for you on a go-forward basis?
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. And Doug, the one thing that I love to just put out there is why? Why do you want to do this? Because if we can answer that question and we can recognize why we're doing this, we are going to be so much more successful.
Well, Rebecca, thank you very much for joining us today and providing all your expertise, because I know you do a lot of this work. And hopefully your expertise is going to help our viewers move forward on a better financial plan for 2021. So again, I thank you very much and wish you all the best of luck in 21. And as for the viewers, thank you very much for watching the show today. We hope we've been able to provide you some insight. If you have any questions, concerns, or suggestions for future shows, please email us. Go onto the show page at Rogers Berry TV and click on the link. Until next time, I'm Doug Jones, and thank you very much.